Hi guys, welcome to the Chica channel. My name is Rachel, and today we have Leah Day Chase.
Woo!
And I'm super pumped to have her with us. Leah is one of my dearest friends. She lives behind me.
Literally next door.
It's the best. Literally the best, because our children are the absolute best friends, and they just walk to each other's house almost every day.
Yeah, easy.
You'll have to excuse our voices because we both got sick this last week, so we sound a little rough, but
I'll do this if I cough.
Just cover the mic. But anyway, so today I'm so excited to talk about what we're going to talk about, because it's not often talked about in society today.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's just super important. And so really what we're going to cover is miscarriage. I wish I knew the statistics. Do you remember the statistics of how many people? I think it's like 1 in 4 women have a miscarriage.
Really common.
Super common. And both Leah and I have gone through this before, and we had realized that once we had experienced it, we're like, why does no one really talk about this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we had found out later on, like, people we knew, close friends, whatever, they've gone through this. Not all of them, but a few of them had gone through it, and we're like, oh, that's crazy, no one told us, or no one talked to us about it. And I think that it's just super important, and especially as believers, especially as women who are burning for Jesus, like really opening up this world of loss to us. Like, how do we wrestle with God through loss and through grief and through real pain and the loss of a baby, like a promise from the Lord, or like, just something that you're so looking forward to, and then it's a loss. And I think that whether you've had a miscarriage, whether you are trying to get pregnant, whether you've had a stillborn, whatever your story is, or maybe you're just waiting on the Lord for a baby, or maybe you're just listening to this because you're like, oh, I'd love to hear the story about a miscarriage and just hearing how they process through it. You're welcome here. And I think that this is just super important to talk about loss as we are Christians. And I just want to make it more normal. I mean, that was like, even for me, when I experienced a miscarriage in 2019. It was our first baby. We were trying, and we were like pregnant. It was super exciting. And then I miscarried the baby around 9 weeks. And I was actually doing a workout when I started bleeding. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, it was because I worked out, or whatever it was. It was like, you always try to kind of blame something for a piece of closure. And there's just not answers to miscarriage, and it's so hard because you'll never really be able to diagnose it normally. And I'll talk more about my story as we continue, but Leah's been through this, so I wanted to just bring her on. And so Leah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first of all, and then we'll dive into your story.
Well, like Rachel said, my husband and I live across their yard.
Like
literally
20
neighbors.
feet away.
Yeah. And we are working with Youth with a Mission. We've been here for 7 years now, and we have 2 beautiful little girls. One of them is the same age as Rachel's oldest, Reese, and they're just like the best buddies, and we love being here. And we love the Mathises.
Okay, Leah, why don't you tell us a little bit about your guys' story with trying to get pregnant, your miscarriage, just kind of like, give us that year in a picture.
Yeah, I feel like it's funny because a lot of our story with the miscarriage, so much of the wrestle that I experienced with it came because our initial invitation into getting pregnant, we really felt like it was an invitation from the Lord. Because originally when we got married, we really felt like we're going to wait like a year to get pregnant. Let's just like be us for a little bit. And it wasn't until we were probably like 5 months into being married that we were just being challenged by the Lord really like naturally in some areas, and felt like specifically one of these areas was fear, about not being motivated by anything in fear. And I noticed that like, I think actually maybe one of the reasons that I don't want to get pregnant is actually because I'm afraid to be a mom. And we just felt this invitation from the Lord, like, hey, we don't want to make any decisions out of fear. I think we actually need to get back to the Lord in prayer to really like see, was this God that we made this decision on like waiting to have a baby, or was it just our own like good idea or what we wanted? because I didn't want to do anything motivated out of fear. And so I didn't want to make the decision of not getting pregnant just because I was afraid of being a mom.
Right.
And my husband was kind of like open to having a baby whenever. So as I kind of processed it with the Lord, really realized like, yes, I think this is because of fear that we're not doing this. So I think that we just need to like go for it. We need to like not put anything in the way of it and just like totally surrender it to the Lord and see what happens. And honestly, in my heart, I was like, we're getting pregnant right away. I know it. Like, and my husband was like, no, babe, like people try for years before they get pregnant. And I was like, no, I think I'm like almost sure that we're going to get pregnant right away. And sure enough, like first month we were trying, then we got pregnant. And so for me, it really was like, it felt like an invitation from the Lord to step into something deeper, and to really overcome fear in my life. And I was afraid until the moment I saw like a positive test. And I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. Like I was afraid until the moment. And then I was like, oh, I'm good. Like God's going to give me grace for this and let's roll. And so then as we actually like walked into the pregnancy, I was really excited. Like I was just like, we were both super stoked for it. I naturally really like kids. So I was like excited to be a mom.
Yeah.
Like, and just like figure it out. Like I was excited to figure it out more than like, more than I definitely feel like I still had a little bit of fear. And it's funny to me because I think I actually what I was more afraid of was being a mom to daughters. I was really nervous to like have girls and raise girls, which is ironic because now I have 2 girls.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we kind of like walked into it. We were pretty excited. We're telling family. And then it was around, I think 8 weeks that I started to bleed and I started to like experience cramping. And I was like, I don't really know what this is. Like, I know that some people have miscarried, but it was like you said, not a lot of people talk about it. Yeah. So I wasn't really sure what to think about it. I don't think I realized how common it actually was because not very many people talk about like their experiences.
Yeah.
But I knew you had, and so I feel like I texted you pretty like quickly. It was like, what do I do? What's happening? But I think the wrestle in my heart was like immediately as soon as I started bleeding, it was like this immediate like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Like, what did God say? Yeah. Like, is this okay? Like, what's happening? Is God gonna like see us through this? Like, is it just implantation bleeding? Like all of these questions. And I honestly feel like in the beginning we really stood our ground and we really felt like the Lord gave us Psalm 18 over that baby, which is all about like the ropes of death entangled me, but God came down on a thundercloud and like helped me and saved me, and he like made me as sure-footed as a deer. Like all of that whole psalm. Yeah. That I bled for a few days, I think. And we just would read the psalm over myself and over my womb, over my baby, like every day, all day. Like I was just like reciting this psalm over and over, just really claiming it and really trying to like say, it was so crazy. Like, just like it really like it was an anchor for us like during that whole week. Yeah. And so then when I actually, I remember genuinely feeling like faith in my heart. Like, no, you can't, like the enemy can't touch this pregnancy. Like it's going to be fine. And, so then when we actually like lost the baby, it was actually really significant because, we had been reciting that psalm all week long about like, the ropes of death entangling me, but God like came down on a thundercloud to like meet me. And that day that we lost the baby, it was dumping rain in Kona. Like it was just like thunder and lightning raining. And I remember this moment looking at Elliot and being like, oh my gosh, like God's coming to us on a thundercloud. Like this is still his goodness. Like I had this moment of clarity of like, no, the scripture still stands. Like this, everything that we've been praying, God's still meeting us in this. And it was just this really beautiful like day, honestly. But then I feel like, just after that like moment for me, it really came down to like, I felt so challenged in my own idea of like the goodness of God, that like we'll talk sometimes in our community about how like the trials and the hard parts of life can actually like reveal where there's cracks about what you really believe about God, about what you really believe about like the character and nature of Jesus and the goodness of God. And I feel like for me, experiencing miscarriage was the first big, very personal moment of like having to really wrestle with like, okay, is God good? And if he is good, why do bad things happen? Like, why do people die? Why do kids get cancer? Why doesn't he heal everyone?
Yeah.
Like, it was my first personal time. Like, I had walked through seasons with other people through those questions, but I had never really had to like believe it for myself before.
Yeah.
So that was the first season for me of really having to ask those hard questions. And there were totally moments when I wanted to like just slap a Band-Aid on it and be like, God's good, it's totally fine. Let's roll. Like, everything's going to be fine. But I actually really felt the Lord challenge me. Like, no, Leah, I need you to wrestle through this. Like, this is really important that you get this now.
Yeah.
I don't want you to leave this place until you've wrestled with me. And just felt like the grace of God for him to be like, please ask me the hard questions. Like, I really want you to like process this and really go through it. And I was thankful that there was like, I knew that you had experienced miscarriage and we cried on your couch like that week. And I knew that like our friend Shannon had like walked through it. And so I cried with her too. Like, I found these two women really that I was like, I know these two have done this before. So I just need anything that they have. Like, I just remember feeling like I just need anything. Like, I need anybody who's done this before to tell me that like what you found in the valley, because I have to know like what you found, because I don't know what's down here. Like, it sucks down here. Like, it just sucks. I feel like I lost my kid, and I remember this horrible feeling of like, oh, I have to start all over again. Like, I remember that being such a big weight for me of like, wow, now I have to like wait for my body to heal and feel normal again and get over all this grief. And then I have to start all over again and get pregnant again. And then I have to do this whole first trimester again, worrying if I'm going to miscarry. Like, I remember the weight of like all of these things. Yeah. I so badly just wanted other people, community to be like, tell me that you've done this before. And that it's possible to do this and like come out the other side, you know?
It's so good.
I just feel like in that season of really wrestling with the Lord, it was so important that I had like other women with me that had done it before.
Absolutely. I think something that when I went through a miscarriage, I reached out to one of my friends who was living in Washington at the time, and she's the only person that I'd known who had gone through a miscarriage. And she told me, she's like, Rachel, miscarriage is like this secret little club that you do not want to be a part of. Yeah. But you get in this club, and only the people who have gone through a miscarriage know exactly how you feel and know exactly the grief you're going through, know exactly the pain of like watching yourself lose a baby, losing hope, losing expectation. And I just remember being like, wow, that's the weirdest thing. But yeah, it's like you're in a little club. And then I'm now telling other women like, hey, you're like in this little miscarriage club, and I don't know how to explain this, but it's like only people who have been through it are going to be able to really grieve with you the loss that it is. And I think that, it's so much, and you don't know, like you're saying, you're in this valley. I've never been in this valley before. Where do I go from here? Like, what do I believe about God? Like, okay, there's people in my community that have gone through this before. They're happy now. Am I ever going to be happy again? Am I ever going to see a baby? Like, you're just wrestling with these real life questions. And I just love what you were talking about, how the Lord was like, no, sit with me and like feel this thing. Because a lot of our tendencies, even in faith, high faith, like beautiful, like community that we're in, we have a tendency to not pay attention to pain, because we're just like, God's good. Yeah. All the time.
We're good here. Yeah.
You know, and so I think it's just something that's so beautiful, is to suffer with Jesus. I think that was one thing that we were experiencing when we were like, we had found out, we were praying like you guys, like believing that this baby would be saved, believing that I wouldn't pass the baby. And then when I did, Jeff's like, okay, let's just worship. Like, let's like praise Jesus. because we still love him and trust him, even though this was not the outcome that we expected.
Yeah.
And we're totally devastated. Like, we feel depressed. We feel heartbroken. And either we can just like ignore it and move on and just like, well, we'll try again for another baby, or we can sit here and it's uncomfortable. Like,
yeah, totally.
I think that's the thing is, our day and age, we just don't like to be comfortable. I don't know if anyone likes to be comfortable or uncomfortable. Sorry. Yeah. But it's uncomfortable to sit in our pain and to acknowledge how weak and broken we may feel, but it's absolutely necessary to gain full healing, you know, because if you would have never let that yourself sit in that, then once you had another baby, I bet there would have been way more fear for the next pregnancy. There would have been like these things that you were like, oh, I'm so grateful that I actually grieved this loss and sat here with Jesus in the pain. Otherwise, it would have been so much more damaging, maybe long term.
Yeah, it's going through like that valley and being able to come out and still like with resolve in your heart that God's good.
Yes.
But you can still wrestle in this part of the valley. Like, you can still ask the hard questions. And like, I think one of the things that really I settled in my heart during that time was this verse in Deuteronomy that says there are secrets, God has secrets that no man can know, but we are accountable to the things that he has revealed to us.
Yeah.
And it was like this settling in my heart of like, okay, there will, like, in life with God, there will be things that we will not know the answer to. And that doesn't mean that he's not good. Like, we're responsible, we're accountable for the things that he has revealed to us. And the things that he has revealed is that he's good and that he's faithful and that he'll come through. The things that he has revealed to me are that my body's not broken and my body is made well. And like all of these things that I had to really like, okay, what has he revealed to me?
Yeah.
I have to like settle in my heart that the things that I can't know, that's okay.
Yeah.
And there's just going to be stuff that I don't know. And it's like this peace on long suffering too, that like it's a fruit of the spirit that we don't really talk about.
Totally.
But I remember a couple months ago, someone was teaching and he said, we were talking about healing and people getting healed. And he was saying like, I don't know why not everybody gets healed, but I do know that God is in the miracle and he's in the long suffering.
Yeah.
Like both are God.
Yeah.
And you find both, like you find him in both sides.
Yeah.
And I just remember hearing that and thinking like, oh, that's like miscarriage. Like,
yeah.
Oh, like he's in the long suffering and he's in the miraculous healing where you stop bleeding and your baby's fine. Yeah. Like he's there and you find him and your faith is solidified and God's good. And then you lose your baby and he's there and you find him and God's good. Yes. And like you learn how to do the long suffering part too.
Yes.
That I think for so long I wrestled with this like, well, God's only good on this side, on the miracle side and the healing side. But then this side, what does this say about God's character and nature if this doesn't happen? If like what we're praying for doesn't work?
Yeah.
And kind of really needing to settle in my heart like, okay, the enemy, like he's not this like sweetie little Disney villain. Like he actually like hates us and he wants to kill our kids. Like I had to really settle that in my heart. Like, no, the enemy hates me and he's after my kids. Like he hates me and it's not God's fault. And the enemy obviously, like, I don't know what your experience would be in your miscarriage, but I feel like with us, he really quickly turned the knife to God's throat to be like, this is all his fault. Like, point fingers at him. Like the enemy's like, all he wants to do is make it about God and make it about his character and nature.
Right.
But if you can walk through those valleys and settle in your heart, this actually has nothing to do with God.
Yeah.
Like this has nothing to do with his character and nature. Then like you'll never walk through hard seasons the same again.
Yeah.
If you can actually like walk through that and settle in your heart, this has nothing to do with the goodness of God.
Yeah.
Then every other hard season will be totally different.
Yeah.
Than like what you're saying, like, oh, if you just ignore it and get pregnant again and you're like stressed out for the entire time you're pregnant and then the baby's born and doesn't stop. Like, I think that's another aspect of it of like me realizing the anxiety like of losing a baby doesn't stop when the baby's born.
Yes.
Like if you don't settle this in your heart now, you will have anxiety for the rest of your life, and it's never going to end.
Yeah, it will seep into every area of your life, especially even when the children are actually here and grown and running into the street.
And
it's
terrifying.
It's just going to take you out completely.
Yeah, totally.
Gosh, it's so... I think one of the most beautiful things in life is suffering, and no one likes to talk about it, or we don't want to embrace it. But I just remember being like, gosh, there's this experience with Jesus in the darkest valley, like in the suffering, that is so sweet and so beautiful. And like, oh, it makes me want to cry just being like, gosh, you don't experience that on your good days. But there's like a beauty and a maturity and a steadfastness and a grit that's formed in suffering that you won't access on a happy day. And it's like, I know that my miscarriage, like I feel like grit was born like in me, where I was like, I lost a baby. I did not get shaken. I felt like God graced us to just like turn to him and like believe and like grieve well, but also believe in faith for what he had for us. Like, I know that I was not taken out by the enemy through a loss. And I'm like, I'm so thankful I didn't question God's character in the midst of my miscarriage, because I think a maturity and a grit was born in me. And in that season of my life more than maybe any other time, you know, like I was like telling Jeff, I'm like, I think I was joking with him because I was saying how like kids are just like the most like refining things in the world. They're incredible. Like, I love my children so much. But I was saying when Jeff and I first met, I was single. I was reading like a lot of books, a lot of dead theologians. Like, that's like how Jeff and I bonded, was like, oh my gosh, you're reading Charles Spurgeon, you're reading Richard, whatever, you know, just all these guys. And I told Jeff, I'm like, it's crazy because I was like having like 2 hour quiet times back then. I was reading all these theologians, but I am more like Jesus right now, with no theologians on my nightstand. With
so true.
An hour quiet time, or praying in tongues, doing dishes. And having these 2 children that have totally shaped my life. And when I look back on the last...
These 3 children.
3. Exactly. 3 children, a loss of a baby, and then now these 2 toddlers. I'm like, the last 4 years of my life have made me more like Christ than anything else. And I'm 100% convinced it's because of what I've experienced in my intimacy with Jesus, and how I have desperately clung to him in loss,
in the
miscarriage, and then in the baby. You know, it's like, no matter what, I know that God has created us as women to have grit and to have a faith that's steadfast. And, you know, in the midst of all of the things that we're going through, whether it's victories or losses, he's going to use our story and our choosing of him to shape us. And I'm just so grateful. All that say, sorry, very long-winded, but I'm just so grateful for the loss that I had, in a weird way, because I'm like, I experienced Jesus in a way that I know I don't think anything else has.
It's my husband and I will talk about how we look back at that season of miscarriage as one of our favorite seasons with the Lord. Like, because it was that. It's the wrestle of suffering that brings you to a place. Well, it's an invitation. To not everybody chooses that depth. Not everybody chooses to go there. But I think we got kind of like took it and just like rode the waves. And now looking back, it really is like, oh my gosh, like that was one of the sweetest seasons I've ever had with Jesus. Was in the trenches, like crying and yelling and like being mad at him. And wrestling things out. That I was looking back over my journal this morning over that time of miscarrying and the things that I had written and the prayers that I was praying. And I was telling my husband about it, and I was like, wow, I was hearing so much from the Lord during this time. Like, I was able to look back on like so many dreams, so many really clear words of the Lord leading us through that season. That in the moment, it all felt dark fuzzy. And swirly and like, I don't know what's happening. But then now, almost 4 years out, looking back, I'm like, wow, look at this beautiful breadcrumb trail that the Lord like
Yeah.
led us through this valley
Yeah.
really gracefully.
Mm-hmm.
That is so stunning to like look back at now.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'm like flipping through my journal, and then I flip forward to the month that we got pregnant.
Yeah.
With my daughter, and then I look up and she's right there, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, like this is so good. I'm like crying and hugging her, and she's like, hey mom, like she literally was like, mom, you're hurting me. And I was like, okay, I just need a minute with you. But it was like so crazy to like look in front of me at this like season that at the time felt so dark and
Yeah.
swirly and weighty, and be able to just flip through a few pages
Yeah.
and be like, oh my gosh, look at like what the Lord said.
Yeah.
Like, look at what the Lord did. Like, look at these dreams that I was having where he was promising me, like, no,
Yeah.
I've got you. Like,
Yeah.
don't be afraid. You'll have a baby in August. And then like Rain was born in August of the next year. Like, it was just like the craziest things that I just had to cling to. The Lord really taught me. I feel like what you're talking about like the Lord really developed a grit in you.
Yeah.
It's true. Like he taught me how to really like cling to him in that time and cling to words of the Lord. Yeah. Like when nobody was saying anything encouraging, or when nobody was like telling me to get pregnant. Yeah. Again, it's that like thing that we talk about like nobody would blame you if you just like don't even try again. Yeah. Or like nobody would blame you if you just like wait 3 years or like whatever. But knowing the conviction in my heart, like the Lord said not to do anything out of fear. Yeah. And that means even now. Yeah. Like I can't withhold even after a miscarriage because of fear. Like I know what the Lord said, and I have to go with the word of the Lord and swing for it. Yeah. That like it really developed me and my husband both in like our faith. Yeah. Muscles and our grit muscles of like, no, like we know what the Lord said and we have to keep rolling. You know, like it's just like there's no other season that shapes you like that. Yeah, that's true. Gosh, it's so good. What would you say are like some tools that helped you in that season? Like aside from community and having people that helped you, aside from having people that like had been through it, had helped you kind of walk through it, what were some tools for you guys like in the middle of the wrestle to not like be taken out, to not give up in the wrestle, to not be like, that's it, I'm done. Like how did you keep fighting till you came out of that type of thing? Yeah. I feel like totally community is a big one. You want to isolate. Like I feel like the temptation is to isolate and withdraw and be like, nobody knows what I'm going through, so I'm just going to like not even try. Yeah. I think honestly for me it really came down to community and honesty, like getting really honest with the Lord. Yeah. In the areas where I can be often tempted to like figure it out and then go to the Lord, or like find the answers and then approach the Lord and be like, I figured it out. Everything's fine now. But actually the invitation is stay super honest with the Lord no matter how long it takes. It's good. I think was helpful to me because then even when the meal train stopped, it's not like I could tie a bow on my grief and be like, I'm done. Everything's fine now. We're going to have another baby and I'm not afraid. Like the meal train stopped and I kept wrestling. Like I had to keep going for as long as it took for me to settle it with God. That's so good. And I think that honesty piece was really huge for me. And for my husband. I think that our processes were different. For him, I feel like the Lord led him through a lot of like the Lord teaching him about how he's a man acquainted with many griefs and all that stuff, that he was a shepherd that really like wept with him. Wow. While I was over here wrestling about the goodness of God. Yeah. But I feel like for both of us, it was really key just that we stayed really honest with each other and really honest with the Lord and like stayed in our grief for as long as it took for us to like feel like it was settled in our hearts. That's really good. Yeah. That's so important. I think we get afraid to sit in the wrestle where you're like, wow, this is like a 4-day wrestle. Okay. Day 5, here we go, you know, but I think not rushing out of the process is so important.
Okay, so through being just like super honest with yourself, when did you feel like you were able to start talking about it openly?
I'm just always an open book. I feel like the moment that I started bleeding, I was like, help.
Yeah.
I feel like I was pretty open about it from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think for me it became something that because nobody talks about often,
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty adamant like, oh, I want to talk about this because nobody's doing it. And if it really is this common, why is nobody talking about it?
Yeah.
And I remember having this comment that someone told me who is an older lady. She had this funny comment where she said like, oh yeah, so sorry that this happened to you. Like, when I was young, it was like we assumed that everyone lost their first baby.
Oh wow.
And it was this funny like, what? Like, how? I didn't know that. Then why have you not said something?
Yeah.
Like, is it really that common that she? And it felt like it was almost like she expected that I would lose my baby,
right?
And in a weird way that I was like, that's so funny that you said that.
Yeah.
Why? I want to talk about. I want to tell everyone this, that not in like a way of like, hey, everyone, I had a miscarriage, feel bad for me, but in a way of like, no, I want you to know that this happened to me because if you need anything, you have to tell. I have to fight for you.
Absolutely.
Like, I was in that valley and I came out and God's still good.
Yeah.
Like, it's not cocky to say like, hey, I came out alive.
Yeah.
It's not like, look at me, I did it. It's like, no, I can help you.
Yeah.
Just like you helped me.
Mm-hmm.
Just like other women helped me pull me out and be like, no, look now. Like, look at me now. Like, you were pregnant with Reese at the time.
Yeah.
And I was able to say like, no, I know this is possible. Like, I know that it's possible to get pregnant again soon. And I know that this will happen to us in the Lord's timing. And, just being able to like say that and communicate it actually felt really important to me from the get-go. Yeah. Of like making sure that people knew how common it was and that it actually like that we need to talk about it. Yeah.
It's so good. Okay, so moving from like, okay, we experienced loss, and then moving from like, okay, we're grieving this, and now we want to start trying again. Mm-hmm. What was your guys' process from going from the loss of a baby to wanting to start trying again for another one?
For us, when I lost our first baby, then I felt like the Lord said, in one of the moments that I was meeting with him, I felt like he said, don't be afraid, you'll have a baby in August. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like running the calculations in my head for a due date. And I'm like, okay, that would mean that I would need to get pregnant like soon, like this month or next month.
Yeah, that's so your Enneagram 6.
I'm like immediately calculating.
You're like, great, so next week.
My due date calculator on Google immediately. But because I had just miscarried, I had no idea where my cycle was at. Yeah. And so it wasn't something that I thought I could try for, even if I wanted to. I'm like, I don't even know how to try for this if I want to, because I just miscarried a baby. Like, I don't know where my period's at. Yeah. Is your miscarriage a period? Like, what is how? I don't know how this works. So I had to I told Elliot, and I was like, hey, I think the Lord said this. Mm-hmm. Don't know what to do about it. Yeah. And the doctors will say, like, wait until you have a few cycles. Mm-hmm. Just to like let your body reset. Yeah. And I think I had one cycle between, but I felt this word of like the Lord saying August. And I remember being at a small group time with a bunch of women, and the leader of the small group was like, I want you guys to share words that you've gotten that might seem like meaningless. They might seem very small.
I remember this. I want to start crying because I remember this moment. This?
She was like, I want you to share these words with the people around you so that you're like held accountable to them. Yeah. And so that you say them out loud. Like, you can't just sit on them. And I pulled our friend Jenny and Shannon, and I pulled them in, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. I feel like the Lord, and I just miscarried. Like, everyone's like still being like, sorry, Leah, for your loss. I'm like, I feel like the Lord said August. I don't know. This would literally mean it was October at the time. And I'm like, this would mean that I would get pregnant like this month, but I have no idea how to try for that. Yeah. and they were both like, we're with you. If God said August, it's going to be August. And I just remember this, like,
I'm
like,
not crazy.
I don't even know if this is legit or not. I just, like, think I heard this, but I'm going to swing for the fence.
Come on.
And that season for me was a huge, like, learning how to swing for the fence and look like a fool.
Yeah.
Rather than, like, living my life in, like, just being skeptical of the Lord.
Yeah.
At, like, any little thing that he would say.
Yeah.
I knew, I was like, I will not live my life just, like, bitter or skeptical at the words of the Lord. Like, if he's saying this, I want to keep my heart tender and I want to swing for the fence, even if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Come on.
Like, that's just fine for me right now. Like, I'm already sad.
You're like, what do I got to lose?
What do I got to lose? Literally, I'm like, let's just go for it. And it was so funny because it was like a series of dreams that I had throughout that month that I was like, what is the Lord doing? What is he saying? And then there was a morning where I had a dream that I took a pregnancy test, and in the dream, I took the test and I was waiting for it, and I started praying over and over in the dream, God, multiply my faith, multiply my faith, multiply my faith. And I looked up in the dream and it was positive. And I woke up I woke up in the morning from the dream, and Elliot's still sleeping, and I'm like, I should just take a test. Like, this is kind of crazy, but whatever. And I had taken them before, so I was like, I'm the person that takes like 1,000 tests at a time, and it's like, what is it? And like 2 seconds later, I'm like, I should probably take another one just in case. So I like go into the bathroom and I have like one test left, and I'm like, I'll just take it. And so I take the test, and as I'm like waiting for it, I'm like, God, multiply my faith. Like, I guess like this is the dream that I had, and I just started praying like, God, multiply my faith, and I look and it's positive. So and I go in and I run into Elliot. I'm like, I think we're pregnant. And he's like, drive to Walmart right now and get the digital one. He's like, we need the like word. Yeah, literally. And so I'm like driving to Walmart at 6 a.m. Like, God, what's happening? Is this real?
Come on.
And it's that I get the digital one and it's legit. It's like pregnant.
Come on.
And it was just the craziest, like, gosh, like, Lord, you said it. Like, you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Like, and it's going to be your way.
Yeah.
But then it's crazy because then after that, we got our first ultrasound.
Yeah.
Of my daughter, Rain, and they couldn't find the baby. They're like, there's no baby in here. Sorry, I don't think you're pregnant. And I'm like, no, the Lord told me August. Like, I, at that point, had already walked through the valley.
Yeah. Settled
in my heart, this isn't about God.
Yeah.
He's good, and he told me this.
Yeah.
And so then I go through this other thing of the enemy being like, I'm going to steal from you again. And it was like there truly was like this testing and this settling of like, no.
Yeah.
This time it's not actually about God. Like, I was feeling so nauseous and so sick, which I hadn't had in my first one.
Yeah.
My first pregnancy. So I was like, no, like, I feel pregnant. I'm like,
you're like, this nausea is not for no reason.
Not for nothing. And the Lord told me August. Like, I knew it. And at the time we were on a trip, and then we were going on another trip to Central Asia, and then coming back. So we wouldn't be back home for like a month.
Yeah. And
so I had to go through that whole month with being like, God said August, like, I'm still nauseous. I'm still getting positive tests. I'm just gonna like believe that like maybe your machine was wrong, or like it was too early to see a baby, like anything. But I remember just like being there and them saying that, and I like cried for a minute. And I was like, wait a second. The Lord said August. Like, no, like, I have to believe for this. Like, I really believe for this. And we got back from our trip and got an ultrasound, and it was this giant, beautiful 12-week baby.
Come on.
That's my daughter, Rain.
Yes. Gosh, it's
like
so
the craziest.
Good. I love it.
Oh, it's so nuts. So the Lord like leads you through the whole time.
Yeah.
With like clear words.
Yeah.
That you just have to learn how to swing for the fence and just like
and cling on
go
to.
With it.
Yeah, it's so good. And I think that realizing that going from like experiencing the loss to getting pregnant again, like all of those fears don't just magically go away.
Totally.
Like, I remember when I was pregnant with Reese, I would, every time I'd go pee, I'd wipe to see if I was bleeding. You know, it's like, even with my daughter Nova, her pregnancy, it was like,
I did that through all 4 pregnancies.
And it was like almost this learned behavior because of the trauma I'd experienced, where I was like, okay, like, actually, I'm just going to have to do this, and I'm going to have to do it afraid.
Yeah.
And I think that it was really like facing the crossroads of like, am I going to take a risk or not? Because getting pregnant again after experiencing a loss is a risk.
Yeah.
And I remember reading this quote. I want to read it because this quote just carried me through. Mm-hmm. It said, "For obedience's sake, for your own purification's sake, and for the glory of Christ's sake, Christians ought to embrace risks of love that almost certainly will involve suffering." Mm-hmm. And I remember reading that, and I was like, wow, actually, like, trying again for a baby is a risk for love. Yeah. It's because of love. Like, my husband and I love each other. Mm-hmm. We want to bring children into this world. Mm-hmm. Like, this risk that I'm about to take with trying to get pregnant again could result in another miscarriage. Mm-hmm. It could result in a stillborn. Yeah. It could result in complications, you know, like, and then my pregnancy with Reese, I had preeclampsia, got rushed to Oahu, had him 7 weeks early. He was in the NICU. Yeah. So in the same way, I'm constantly being tested. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, this was a rainbow baby. Yes, this was the promise. Yeah. But then in the middle of this promise, am I going to still cling to the word of the Lord? Mm-hmm. Even knowing everything around me is telling me, Rachel, you're going to die if you don't get this baby out. Yeah. And I'm like, totally. And then my husband jokes, he's like, you just go Stone Cold Jackson. I'm like, let's do this.
Let's get it out.
Let's get this baby out. No, but I think that I just was so inspired by that because I was like, Christians ought to embrace risks for love. Mm-hmm. I'm like, that is who we are. Yeah. We are risk takers. We are women of grit, women of faith, women that are going to do something even though we're afraid. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so counterculture because what the world's trying to tell us is, oh, if you're afraid, don't do it. Mm-hmm. Oh, if it's too much, don't do it. If it's overwhelming, don't do it. Mm-hmm. If it's not self-care, don't do it. You know, the spirit of the age is coming at us trying to tell us like, oh, don't do it. We don't feel bad for you. Like you said,
or no one's going to blame you.
No one's going to blame you if you don't try again for a baby. Yeah. And it's actually like, you need people around you that are like, you better freaking try for another baby. You're a woman of God. Yeah. You're going to do things that are scary.
Like, God told you this. Like, this is actually like a word of the Lord.
Absolutely. And I'm like, I don't want those people around me patting my back and like, oh, no one would blame you, Leah. Like, you just had a miscarriage. No, you want someone that's going to look you in the eyes and be like, God said, so when are you guys going to go try? Go try. You know, literally. But I'm just like, gosh, we have to realize that as Christians, we are going to embrace risks that will almost certainly involve suffering and to not shy away from suffering, but even invite it. Like, God, you transform me in suffering. Like, even we want another baby eventually. And I'm like, I was telling Jeff, I'm like, I feel nervous when I think about getting pregnant again.
Totally.
Because I've lost a baby, because I've had very high risk pregnancies, awful births. Both of my births were awful. So I'm just like, I haven't had this history or track record of incredible experiences with pregnancy, but I do know, like, it's so worth it. Mm-hmm. That risk for love for another Mathis little baby is going to be so worth it.
And those are the people you want.
100%.
Like, I lost a baby, and I don't want to go to the people who are going to be like, oh, you know, I went to you and Shannon, like the two people that would be like, oh, we've done this before. We've come out the other end. You can do this. Like, keep going. Yeah. Like, I wanted to run to the women that had done it afraid. Yeah. And, like, stayed with it. Yeah. Because those are the people that I'm like, Christ is alive in you. Yeah. Like, the word of God is alive in you. I have to see what you've seen. You know? Like, those are the people that, like, draw, even the people outside the church. Those are the people that they look to. Yeah. Are the ones that are like, what do you have that we don't have? Gosh. Like, you're going through something so hard and you're doing it anyway. Yeah. And you're sticking with it for what? Like, those are the people that actually we need to be in the church. And those are the people that will draw other people towards the church, are the ones that are saying, like, we're going to do it anyway. So and we're afraid, but we're just doing it because we believe in something way bigger than all of this. That, like, and that we're doing it not pointing fingers at God. Yeah. You know, and it's like you said, like, I could miscarry again, but it's no longer about, like, the goodness of God. It's no longer about, like, whether or not my body can do it. It's no longer about all of these questions that come up about it. Like, you settle something in your heart and you roll. And it's like, those are the people that you want on your team anyway.
So good. Yeah. Okay, well, what would you, if there's anyone out here that has a similar story or a similar, you know, going through some suffering or whatever it may be, like, what could you leave them with as an encouragement or as some tools? Just like
Yeah.
if they're in the valley, like if anyone's in
Totally.
the valley right now, what would you give and leave them with, like
Yeah.
as an encouragement
I feel like,
or a challenge?
no, I feel like the things that really carried us through the most, really were like, as soon as we started losing that baby, we felt like the Lord gave us like Psalm 18 as a weapon. Like we really felt like it was a very clear, like, sword that both of us could hold, that really solidified something in us and carried us through that time. That I feel like scripture is, of course, like you have to pick any, even if it's like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want anything, even if it's the smallest thing, getting any kind of scripture somewhere in your house, somewhere memorized, just able to like wash yourself with the word is so important. It was a lifeline for us to anchor ourselves, because it's like you said, everyone nowadays is going to be like, no one would blame you, don't worry about, like, everything is like self-care, don't, it's like whatever, just go easy, whatever. Or they're going to try and tell you stuff about who God is or what to do when it's hard, and you can find anything on Google about like grief and whatever. But you need the word of the Lord, like you need the word of God, like absolutely washing you in that season, because it's true, he was the man acquainted with many griefs, like he knows suffering better than any of us, and to wash yourself in the word is probably the most valuable tool you can have in grief, I think. And then even as you're walking out of it, I would say, like, those little tiny words of the Lord that like the whispers, that even if it's not like a angelic visitation word, those tiny whispers of the Lord that are leading you through it. Like, I'm so grateful going through my journals that I wrote all of them down.
Absolutely.
Because in the moment, I'm like, I don't know if this is right. But now 4 years later, looking back, I can look at those and be like, oh my gosh, like, look at what the Lord was saying about my life now. Like, look at what the Lord said, that I know exactly what he was talking about now, 4 years later. That I think is also like getting any kind of like tiny whispers of the Lord to lead you forward. I think is also so important, like drawing you continually back to like the word of the Lord to cling to, I think is so, so important and valuable.
Absolutely. He's our anchor.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, Leah, why don't you just pray and we'll seal this time.
Holy Spirit, thank you for being our anchor in these seasons and in these valleys that are so challenging. God, I just ask that even if there's anyone listening to this, or just anyone who's walking through this valley right now, God, I ask for your peace, the peace that comes only from God, to settle in their hearts. Jesus, I ask for a grit that would settle in their hearts. God, I ask for all of us, God, that you would mark us as ones with courage, to do things when we're afraid, and to do things really leaning on our beloved, really leaning into who you are and the character and nature of God that is true and stays true, even in the midst of challenge. We just love you, God, and we're thankful for all of our babies, the ones in heaven, the ones on earth, God, the ones to come. God, we're thankful for the blessings that they are, the gifts that they are, the way that they continue to refine us, Jesus, and we just trust you with just the ones in heaven that we don't have all the answers for. We trust you with the ones on earth and the ones to come, Jesus, because you are trustworthy. And we love you. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you for being on with us, Leah. Love you guys. Love you. We'll be back next week. Thanks for tuning in.